For your ears only for the week of October 14th and the second presidential debate, I'm David Alpern.
I'm Catherine Herzog.
Our ambassador in Paris has a Marine detachment guarding him. Shouldn't we have a Marine detachment guarding our ambassador in Benghazi, a place where we knew that there was an al-Qaeda cell with arms?
This lecture on embassy security. The congressman here cut embassy security in his budget by $300 million below what we asked for. When Governor Romney's asked about it, he said, we got to keep these sanctions. When you say, well, you're talking about doing more, what you're going to go to war? Is that what you want to do now?
We want to prevent war.
The interesting thing is how they're going to prevent war. This is a bunch of stuff. Look, here's the deal.
What does that mean, a bunch of stuff?
Well, it means it's simply inaccurate.
It's Irish.
It's Irish. It is. We Irish call it malarkey.
Thanks for the translation.
Unlike President Obama in his first debate with Mitt Romney, Vice President Joe Biden last week was all about counterpunching with passion, plus disdainful smiles and head shaking, whether the issue was Republican challenger Paul Ryan's position on the Libyan consulate attack, the Iran-Israel nuclear challenge, Medicare taxes, or the deficit. But each man accomplished his mission in the sole VP debate of the campaign. Biden re-energized Democrats dispirited by Obama's earlier performance, while Ryan demonstrated calm capability and did nothing to break a new surge of momentum that has the Republican standard-bearer about even or barely ahead in an average of national polls and in key swing state Ohio.
But though the question of who actually won last week's vice presidential debate will have little impact on the election outcome, some of the issues raised may well continue to resonate. Foremost among them was administration policy in the Middle East generally, and Libya in particular, where officials had to admit that embassy requests for more security had been denied, whether Obama and Biden knew it or not. The debate also highlighted Romney-Ryan hardlines on Medicare and abortion that poll poorly, especially among women. To analyze these and other campaign developments for your ears only, we're joined again by Princeton professor of history and public affairs, Julian Zelizer, author of Jimmy Carter and Governing America. Welcome back to our program.
Thanks for having me.
The Republicans are highlighting administration policy and transparency on the tragedy in Libya, where the ambassador and 3 other Americans were killed in a new 9/11 terrorist attack. How do you think this will affect voters clearly most concerned about the economy?
I think it's hard to make foreign policy issues stick when the economy is so bad and so much on people's minds. That said, it can become a measure of President Obama's competence, and Republicans can use it to raise questions about his leadership. That's often how foreign policy plays out in elections that are primarily about the economy.
And also about transparency, an issue about which there have been many questions raised about Obama's earliest promises. Let me ask you, if it were not an election year, and if Hillary Clinton's husband Bill were not Obama's most important endorser, can you see a Secretary of State being asked to resign over something like this?
Well, it's possible to imagine, but in general, presidents don't like to do that. That's an admission of culpability. And the tendency is to stay firm. That's what President Bush originally did with Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld during a bunch of controversies. And you don't like to ask for resignations until it's absolutely essential. And I don't know if the administration thinks that would be warranted anyway. But it's not going to happen right now, both because of the election year, because of Bill Clinton's role, and in general, because I don't think President Obama wants to look weak.
In the upcoming presidential debate on foreign policy, do you think Obama can successfully challenge Romney's vision of U.S. leadership that seems more based on military threat and deals only with Islamic revolutionary forces that, quote, share our values? Are there many? Any?
My guess is there won't be a lot of difference between what you hear from the two candidates, even though they might try to sound different. I think back this summer, President Obama really wanted to highlight his national security credentials. Now he's on the defense. And usually a Democrat on the defense tries to sound more hawkish, sound tougher. And I think that's what you're going to get.
Ryan was clearly following the party line on not being specific about the loopholes they'd closed to cover Romney's cut in tax rates. Do you think that strategy will cost them votes over the next few weeks?
It might. It gives room for Democrats to raise questions about what the tax cuts are if they're really committed to cutting the deficit. That said, there's a long tradition in American politics of presidents promising fiscal plans that don't actually work when you do the math, and refusing to talk about what loopholes they're actually going to close, even when they talk about closing them. So that's something I think Ryan and Romney can get away with, and I think there's a lot of precedent for that.
You've written that vice presidential debates can end the careers of those who lose them badly, which clearly was not the case for either man last week. But did Ryan make a key decision to offend his personal, moral, conservative base by adopting Romney's acceptance of abortion in cases of rape, incest, or life of the mother?
A little bit. I think he's still fine for a run in 2016. I think most voters, even on the right, are savvy enough to know that when you're running as vice president, you have to do things to win, and you have to do things to satisfy the person at the top of the ticket. And I think he has shown his commitment to the right enough that they're willing to give him a little bit of a break there. So I think that's actually something he can get away with politically.
But what about the issue itself? We noticed on the visuals under the debate that that Ryan's defense of his position on abortion, even their joint position on abortion, was his least popular moment, and Biden's defense of abortion rights was his high point.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Republicans have suffered from a huge gender gap for a long time. They've been trying to close it right now because of the economy. And they have some way to do that, meaning if women are more concerned about the economy than issues specific to gender, they can close that gap. The problem is whenever abortion comes up, whenever the Republicans talk about their plan, as you saw during that debate, the numbers fall for the GOP. And so I do think it's a problem. It's going to be a big problem in these swing states, and the Republicans need to keep attention on the economy, not on social issues, because on the social issues they lose.
We noted that Biden pleased the Democratic base with his disdainful antics, but some thought he offended critical, undecided, or swing voters, though a CBS poll of that constituency scored the current Veep ahead by 50 to 31%. What's your view on that, and whether there are even enough undecided to be worth fighting over as opposed to supercharging the base?
Well, in general, vice presidential debates don't matter, and I don't think this one will. So Biden can smile all he wants or nod his head. I don't think it's going to have any huge effect on these swing states. So I think it's more important for Biden to revive the energy of the Democratic base and to get Democrats feeling that there's a story other than Obama falling apart, and he did both of those. So I think the flaws you saw are not significant enough to have any huge effect for the election.
But what about the nature of the election itself? Is it still a fight over this 3, 4, 5% undecided or swing voters, or is it really a question of who can mobilize their base most effectively?
I think it's both. I think we keep going, which is it? I think it's both. I think they need to make sure both sides, that the base comes out, that the votes are there, even in reliable areas, but certainly in the swing states. And then you're at the same time trying to send a message that gets those swing voters to come your way. But usually it's the base, it's the loyal people. You just want to make sure they come out to vote. That's what's going to win it for them.
Princeton professor of history and public affairs, Julian Zelizer. He's the author of Jimmy Carter and Governing America.
Quote from the news, "It's on literary merit. The political fallouts and effects don't enter into it." That was Peter Englund, permanent secretary of the Nobel Committee on the 2012 Literature Awards, to Chinese author Mo Yan, vice president of the state-run Writers Association, which pleased the government and distressed dissidents. Political effects seemed more evident in the 2012 Peace Prize awarded to the European Union, increasingly divided by economic, ethnic, and nationalist issues. Quote, "There is a real danger that Europe will start disintegrating," said panel chairman Thorbjørn Jagland, a former Norwegian prime minister.
Next, meningitis and the argument for regulation. For your ears only.